everyone. Welcome to the opening session of the International Safety at Sea webinar series. My name is Laura Key, and I will be your host for today and tomorrow. The International Safety at Sea event is an annual conference organized by the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore as part of its commitment to promote safety at sea. This year, we are heartened to have over 600 participants from more than 60 countries joining us, with key decision makers from governments around the world, as well as representatives from across different sectors of the maritime industry. Thank you for joining us. To open today's webinar, we are pleased to have Mr. Chee Hong Tat, Senior Minister of State, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Transport, Singapore, to address us. Minister, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm happy to join you at the opening session of the International Safety at Sea webinar series 2020. Maritime safety remains a priority for Singapore during the COVID-19 pandemic. Safety is closely linked to the well-being of our maritime workforce, both seafarers and shore-based personnel. Safety is crucial to global trade and supply chains to keep essential items like food and medical supplies flowing. And safety is important for protecting the environment to lower the risk of accidents and pollution. The annual International Safety at Sea event is a good platform to gather the maritime community to discuss these pertinent issues. Today, I would like to focus on two issues in my speech: how the tripartite partners in Singapore have worked together to facilitate crew change, and how do we use technology to enhance maritime safety. First, on crew change. Seafarers are at the heart of the maritime industry. The border and travel restrictions due to COVID-19 have led to hundreds of thousands of seafarers being stranded at sea. Many have worked beyond their contractual obligations, with some stuck on board for more than 1 year. They could not come on shore or return home to their families. This has led to crew fatigue and affected their mental health, compromising navigational safety. It can also lead to a humanitarian crisis if we do not take steps to address the problem. Singapore will continue to do our part to facilitate crew change safely. It is the right thing to do, and we will do it right. We work very closely with industry associations, unions, maritime companies, and international organizations to implement a safe crew change protocol. In June this year, an industry task force led by the Singapore Shipping Association, in partnership with Singapore Maritime Officers Union, published the Singapore Crew Change Guidebook, which details the protocol we use in Singapore. The guidebook was circulated to member states of the International Maritime Organization as reference. More recently, in September, we established a crew facilitation center at Tanjong Pagar Terminal to safely house crew signing on to ships at our port for up to 72 hours before they board their ships. I'm pleased to announce we'll be moving into phase 2 of our crew facilitation center, which will see enhancements in 2 areas. First, the Crew Facilitation Center will be a center of excellence for crew change protocols. We will test bed emerging technologies that support safer crew change procedures and publish these improved procedures so that others can learn from our experiences and build on them. Second, the Singapore Shipping Tripartite Alliance Resilience, or SG Star Fund Task Force, will further increase efforts and funding to audit and accredit medical and holding facilities at crew source nations. MPA will also be reaching out to our fellow members of the Port Authorities Roundtable to encourage them to join these efforts. This will help ensure that consistent safety standards for crew change are met across the various ports, increasing the confidence of countries to conduct crew change. As a maritime nation, Singapore will not let up in our crew change efforts. It is crucial to ensure the health and well-being of our seafarers. Doing so will translate to fewer marine incidents and increase safety in our waters. Since March, we have facilitated crew change for more than 60,000 crew of different nationalities from more than 3,500 ships. On average, we are conducting some 500 to 600 sign-ons or sign-offs per day. We're prepared to handle more crew change if the number of applications increases. Before COVID-19, we used to handle around 800 crew changes per day. We could not have achieved these results without our unions, industry associations, international organizations, and maritime companies. I thank our partners for their strong support and collaboration. It is a continuous conversation of reviewing current processes, suggesting improvements, and translating these to operational procedures on the ground. This same collaborative approach across sectors and borders is key if we want to transform the maritime sector to deal with the challenges ahead. A good example is Geospace-C, a national marine coastal data repository spearheaded by the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. Together with 12 other government agencies and institutes of higher learning, the repository brings together marine coastal data and information from different disciplines, creating the first ever comprehensive picture of Singapore's sea space. And this is crucial to maritime safety as it would effectively reduce marine incidents. Data from the repository can be used to support sea space planning, given the large number of vessels that use our limited sea space. It will also help our port operations as we adapt to the effects of climate change. I'm happy to share that Geospace-C is now accessible to all participating government agencies. By the third quarter of next year, after the government agencies have further tested the system, Geospace-C will be available to the public, including users from the industry, academia, and research institutions. They can use the system for research and to develop different end-user applications. Industry players can tap on the information to develop improved safety and operational protocols for our waters. For example, shipping companies can make use of environment data on currents and on winds to plan journeys for more efficient sailings and planning of arrival times. Response operations to oil spills in our waters can also be further enhanced by using Geospace-C. We use the data to improve prediction models to forecast the spread of oil spills. These are just some examples of how collaboration and digitalization can enable multi-pronged solutions to tackle complex problems and future challenges. As the busiest transshipment hub port in the world, maritime safety will always be a priority for Maritime Singapore. Safety is a key ingredient of our DNA. It is also a never-ending marathon, which we must keep emphasizing and improving. We'll continue to encourage collaboration between stakeholders within and outside of the maritime sector to develop innovative and practical solutions that we can share with the rest of the world. I wish everyone good health, and may you have many fruitful discussions over the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I would now like to invite Dr. Heike Deggen, Director of the Maritime Safety Division at the International Maritime Organization, to deliver the keynote presentation. Dr. Deggen, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, It is a great pleasure for me to address you today at the opening of the Singapore International Safety at Sea 2020 webinar series. I'm sure most of you will agree with me when I start by saying that shipping is a rather traditional business with a relatively low public profile. Things are done in a certain way, and it has always been like that. I should know, having grown up in a smallish seaside town in Germany, born into a long family line of seafarers. Almost everyone in my hometown earned a living either directly or indirectly from shipping or fishing or from any of the many businesses connected to both. My father, who spent 50 years of his life at sea, most of it as the captain of a fishing vessel, conducted his business very much in the same way as his father and grandfather before him had done. When I joined IMO in 1993, the organization had just started issuing officers with individual personal computers, an upgrade from what was then called the Wang Room, a centralized place with a pool of computer operators. This memory probably reveals my age. When I started, IMO was just beginning to consider the issue of air pollution from ships for the first time and contemplated whether a dedicated officer was needed to deal with the matter. Nobody did foresee at the time that this would become one of the most important issues for the organization to deal with, and in a rather short time. This was 30 years ago, and look how shipping has developed since then. Let me start with an often overlooked non-technical matter, which nevertheless fits perfectly with the theme of my presentation, which is new normal, new paradigms. That matter is gender balance in the shipping workforce, how things have changed during the last few years. Women in shipping has become an IMO matter, and WISTA, the Women's International Shipping and Trading Association, got consultative status with IMO. Although IMO had a few female directors over the years, when I was appointed director of the Maritime Safety Division in 2018, I was the first ever female in charge of one of the technical divisions. And Singapore has its own shining example of what women can do in the shape of Lei Hoon, the current CEO of MPA. Women are much more prevalent in IMO meetings than just 10 years ago, and consequently, the number of female chairs and vice chairs of IMO bodies has increased. Again, Singapore is in the forefront, with Farah Fadil having been elected and re-elected as the vice chair of the subcommittee on human element, training and watchkeeping. So things are moving, albeit slowly, and not only for women, for seafarers, may they be male or female in general. Today's world depends on a safe, secure, and efficient shipping industry. And shipping depends on an adequate supply of seafarers to operate the ships that carry the essential cargoes we all rely on. And despite all the recent interest in autonomous ships, a topic that I will address a bit later, that is not going to change in the immediate future. But an adequate supply of manpower cannot be taken for granted. The most recent industry statistics show that there is a substantial shortfall of seafarers, and this represents a serious challenge for shipping. Clearly, the industry must take further efforts to bring new generations into the profession of seafaring, which must appeal to them as a rewarding and fulfilling career. Today, more than ever, seafaring is a job that demands highly trained and qualified personnel. The modern ship's officer needs to be far more than a navigator or an engineer, and the modern ship's crew needs to be far more than mere workers. In the maritime world, the need for high quality, well-educated and competent people at all levels and in all sectors is as great as it has ever been. It is no exaggeration to say that the safety and security of life at sea, the protection of the marine environment, and over 80% of the world's trade depend on the professionalism and competence of seafarers. But there is no getting away from the fact that the skills required of seafarers are changing, and they are changing significantly and quite fast. Looking into the future, we can see a number of radical new trends, developments, and challenges approaching, many driven by technology, which will doubtlessly affect our work. The so-called fourth industrial revolution will impact shipping very soon, if it has not already. New technologies, including big data, artificial intelligence, and robotics, and the availability of new energy sources are taking shipping into a new era. But there is a strong need to balance the benefits of new technologies with safety and security concerns, in particular cybersecurity, and their impact on the environment and people. Many people tend to have a very outdated idea of what modern shipping looks like. If you visit a modern ship today, you may find the ship being controlled via joystick and mouse rather than by a sailor struggling with a spoked wheel. The chief engineer will spend as much time on a keyboard as using a spanner. Modern ships are technologically advanced workplaces, and IMO plays an important part in shaping these developments. Smart shipping is not a new notion for IMO. There are already many systems on board ships that use smart technologies to assist seafarers with their roles and responsibilities. For example, as part of e-navigation, IMO has been looking at ways of harmonizing the collection, integration, exchange, presentation, and analysis of marine information, both on board ships and ashore, by electronic means, in order to enhance safety and security at sea and the protection of the marine environment. When this work started back in 2006, member states agreed that the implementation of e-navigation should be based on user needs and not be solely technology-driven. Ship communications will certainly play a fundamental role in future smart shipping developments, and it has been recognized that there will be a need for more bandwidth and reliable and cost-effective communications. One of the most recent developments is the recognition of Iridium as the first, after Inmarsat, new mobile satellite service provider for the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System, the GMDSS. Other providers will soon be applying for recognition. Developments concerning VHF data exchange are also progressing, providing higher capacity modulation schemes to allow further exchange of digital information, thus expanding what is already available through the automatic identification system and adding a satellite component. In terms of ship reporting, IMO has encouraged governments that operate approved ship reporting systems to consider using automated electronic reporting means, such as AIS, when reviewing their existing reporting systems or when implementing new ones. The intention is to reduce voice communications as much as possible, reducing the administrative burden on board ships and giving more time to seafarers to focus on other duties. Developments on maritime single window are also looking at ways of implementing electronic exchange of information and harmonization of ship reporting requirements. In line with the recent amendments to the FAL Convention, that is the Facilitation Convention, public authorities had to establish systems for the electronic exchange of information by April 2019. These developments will facilitate the efficiency of reporting and will reduce the time required to report information when calling on ports. There are many other examples of smart shipping-related developments, but one of the most critical and gaining rapidly in importance is cybersecurity. Recognizing that the use of electronic technologies is continually increasing in many areas of shipping, IMO has approved guidelines on maritime cyber risk management to safeguard shipping from current and emerging cyber threats and vulnerabilities. Cyber risks must be appropriately addressed in safety management systems of ships, not later than the first annual verification of a company's document of compliance after 1st January 2021. Considering the human element aspect is vital in this regard. While systems can be protected or recovered by implementing different IT technologies, It is important that humans understand the risks associated with the use and operation of critical systems. Thus, implementing good cyber discipline within an organization is critical to effective cyber risk management in shipping as much as everywhere else. Cyber technologies have become essential to the operation and management of numerous systems critical to the safety and security of shipping and the protection of the marine environment, including bridge systems, cargo handling and management systems, propulsion and machinery management and power control systems, and administrative and crew welfare systems, to name just a few. This has gained particular significance in connection with the recently initiated work on maritime autonomous surface ships, or MAS, as they are now universally known. As you may be aware, the Maritime Safety Committee is currently conducting a scoping exercise to analyze existing IMO instruments to determine how MAS operations might be addressed in a safe, secure, and environmentally sound manner, and concerns have been raised about how this may affect the work of seafarers in the future. When we look further at possible regulation of autonomous ships, this will of course need to be carefully considered. But it is also obvious that any changes in an industry may lead to job function changes and changes in skills required. This is something that the shipping industry will need to look at and be aware of. Technology is moving fast, and shipping is no exception. Many systems that were manual a few years ago are now fully automated, and seafarers need to have the skills to manage, operate, maintain, and even repair ships' systems. Existing technologies available on board ships already address a certain degree of automation. The development of any new provisions or amendments to existing instruments to address MAS will depend on how far member states decide to go in terms of ships' autonomy. Autonomous shipping certainly has the potential to redefine our industry, maybe not in the short term, but definitely in the medium and long term. The technology is developing rapidly, and autonomous ships are already being trialed in some sea areas. However, the operation of such ships will need to be at least as safe as existing vessels if they are to secure regulatory approval, the support of ship owners, operators, and seafarers, and wider public acceptance. Most predictions are that autonomous or semi-autonomous operation would be limited to short voyages. This is certainly true for the short to mid-term time frame. However, it is also clear that the level of automation in the maritime industry will increase substantially. Ladies and gentlemen, the single biggest challenge we are still facing is the battle against global warming and climate change, and the effect this will have on technological developments in shipping cannot be overestimated. IMO has adopted its initial strategy for decarbonization with clear targets and ambitions. Importantly, the reduction of total annual GHG emissions by at least 50% by 2050. This strategy will affect ships' design and equipment, propulsion efficiency, operational practices, and future fuels, among many other aspects of shipping. But more needs to be done. While the strategy is helping to drive shipping's transformation towards a sustainable, decarbonized future, the challenge is to ensure it is implemented and its ambitions realized. That will not be easy. Ships have a relatively long lifespan, and global trading is still predicted to rise. This means that, to realize the ambitious goals of the strategy, significant numbers of zero-carbon ships, or ships that can be easily adapted to use low or zero-carbon fuels, will have to enter the fleet as early as the 2030s. It is expected that these ambitious regulatory targets will act as the catalyst for technology, triggering research, development, and innovation, and maybe also an increased use of already existing zero-carbon technology, such as nuclear power. Taking into account the excellent safety record of currently operating nuclear-powered ships, I would expect that renewed attention is being given to this form of propulsion in the years to come. Interestingly, but maybe not surprisingly, the COVID-19 pandemic has turned out to be a big accelerator for the use of digitalization and new technologies. The pandemic has shown that shipping remains the prime mover of goods around the globe, and therefore shipping and maritime will be at the heart of the recovery. Digitalization, big data, and new technologies are key in enabling the post-COVID recovery and taking shipping into a new era. As far as shipping is concerned, the pandemic has clearly shown what works and what does not work. The unprecedented level of cooperation and collaboration between IMO member governments, UN entities, and industry organizations has been as impressive as it has been successful. We need to capitalize on this never-before-seen teamwork between all entities involved in shipping as we move forward. However, there's also no denying that many COVID-19 related issues in shipping are far from a satisfactory resolution. The ongoing international crew change crisis is a point in case. Hundreds of thousands of seafarers are still waiting to be repatriated after many months at sea, having stayed put way beyond their original contracts. They are fatigued and weary. They cannot go home, and their replacement cannot join ships. This has now become a real safety issue, endangering the safe operation of ships. We cannot expect seafarers to stay at sea forever. Governments must allow shipping to continue moving by getting seafarers to their homes and to their ships to work. The COVID-19 crisis has also painfully demonstrated the huge differences between ports worldwide. While some have developed into fully-fledged smart ports, many others still rely on personal interaction and paper-based transactions. With the world now preparing for a new normal, we need to accelerate the pace of digitalization. Priorities to be addressed include implementation and enforcement of IMO's Facilitation Convention, harmonization of data standards, introduction of port community systems and secure data exchange platforms, guidance to address cyber risks in ports, raising awareness and promoting best practices and standardization and applying emerging technologies, facilitate implementation and operationalization of digital port platforms, improve transparency of the supply chain, and capacity building to support smaller, less developed port communities. There are many more items currently under development as far as innovation and digitalization in shipping are concerned. Too many to give them all the time they deserve in this speech. I am referring to developments regarding fuel cells, blockchain technology, just-in-time arrival, remote surveys, 3D printing, etc. The list is endless. Every new technology developed will have an impact on shipping, one way or the other. Increased automation in shipping has the potential to increase safety, improve environmental performance, and enable more cost-effective shipping. I am always working to ensure shipping can embrace the digital revolution while ensuring safety, security, and environmental protection. Shipping is entering an exciting new age. Under the banner of IMO, all relevant stakeholders, including governments, the shipping industry, ports, technology suppliers, academia, investors, and environmental groups, are actively working to ensure that shipping has a truly sustainable future, so that people everywhere can continue to reap the benefits of an industry they fundamentally rely on but rarely see. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deggett, for setting the stage for our panel discussion next on this year's theme, Maritime Safety, New Normal, New Paradigms. Our moderator today is Mr. Ishaq Ismail, Chairman of the National Maritime Safety at Sea Council, Singapore. Hi, Mr. Ismail.
Hello, Laura.
Joining him on the panel, we have our keynote speaker, Dr. Heike Deggen, Director of the Maritime Safety Division at the International Maritime Organization. Mr. Yang Xingjai, Deputy Director General of the China Maritime Safety Administration. And Mr. Espen Poulsen, Chairman of the International Chamber of Shipping. Before we begin the panel discussion, let us hear from Dr. Cao Desheng, Director General of the China Maritime Safety Administration, for his views on how the maritime community can strengthen cooperation and work together to address new challenges for maritime safety. Dr. Cao, please.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to attend the International Safety at Sea webinar on maritime safety, new normal, new paradigms. I would like to thank MPA for its organization and invitation. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, the webinar is of far-reaching significance in drawing attention to the impact of pandemic of shipping, especially maritime safety, and discussing response measure and best practice. Now, I would like to share some of my view. Over the past year, we have witnessed the joint efforts of mankind in combating COVID-19. Currently, the pandemic is still spreading globally, posing greater challenge to global maritime governance, sustainable development of the shipping industry, and maritime safety supervision. Firstly, the pandemic has seriously affected the physical and mental health of seafarers. According to the statistics, from this March to August, only about 25% of normal crew changes were able to take place on shipping engaged in international voyage. Many seafarers are suffering from fatigue and main stress due to working on board for a long period. Some are worried about getting infected, and still some are unable to attend the training or assessments on shore, so their certificates became invalid. All this may affect seafarers' emotion and operating behaviors. Secondly, increasing operating costs of shipping company and the impact of the pandemic on global maritime trade may lead to suffering investment in shipping safety management. Thirdly, the common and strict preventing measures by ports have negatively affected ship shipment, repair, maintenance, and survey. Lastly, the supervision by maritime authority has been weakened. Port state control as a last defense for ship safety has been suspended in many ports around the world. We believe that this challenge have affected widely, including seafarers, shippers, and shipping companies, and therefore lead to attention, preparedness, and collaboration of all stakeholders. In light of new challenges, China MSA is ready to work with all partners and get through tough times. Taking this opportunity, I would like to share our view and practice on measures to ensure maritime safety and international supply chain connectivity. Firstly, we work on ensuring physical and mental health of seafarers. Seafarers are at the forefront of shipping industry, and they are heroes of global maritime trade. Due to occupation characteristics, seafarers are at a high risk of getting infected. Meanwhile, many are in dire need to take the ships and rest on shore. China MSA developed the guidance on the preventing and control of COVID-19 and on board at the earliest stage of the pandemic and has kept it adapted to its fourth vision, providing guidance to shipping companies, shippers, and seafarers. All editions of guidance have also been communicated to IMO and certificated to the global shipping community. In addition, we assist shipping companies in crew change. By 11th November, 126,063 Chinese seafarers have taken shifts safely and orderly in Chinese ports with no important cases. Secondly, we attach great importance to the humanitarian treatment of seafarers and suffering from sickness or injury. We developed the guidance on the handle of offer urgent assistance to seafarers in case of sickness or injury during the pandemic of COVID-19 and communicated to IMO for sharing with the global shipping industry. By 11th November, 713 seafarers have received emergency treatment at Chinese ports for their sickness or injury, including infecting with COVID-19, and among them, 526 are foreign seafarers. Thirdly, we innovated the supervision made in view of development of digitalization. We carry out the strict flag state control by combining online and on-site inspection with no serious marine accident caused by Chinese flag ships engaged in international voyage in this year. Fourthly, we provide active assistance and facilitation for shipping company. In accordance with our IMO guideline, we have clarified management requirement on certificate of ships and seafarers, adopted measures such as extension of validity of certificates, and conducted training, assessment, and certificates renewal for seafarers online to ensure normal shipping operating. Ladies and gentlemen, China MCA will continue to cooperate with all partners at global, regional, and national levels to ensure maritime safety. We need to work together to strengthen experience sharing and cooperating in maritime safety. Shipping is a highly globalized industry facing the economic globalization and the challenge of COVID-19. No one is outside. The entire shipping industry should join hands and ensuring maritime safety and international supply chain connectivity. We need to work together to promote the maritime community to improve preventing and control measures for ships and seafarers engaged in international voyages. The structure of ships and the way of long-term and close on board living and working of seafarers determine the special preventing requirements for seafarers. In our view, it's necessary to globally implement to policy of seafarers boarding with the nucleic acid test certificates so as protect seafarers by preventing the spread of COVID-19 to ships to reduce the impact on ship operation. We need to work together to better protect the rights and the interests of seafarers. Sufficient medical treats and telecommunication service should be provided for seafarers to ensure their physical and mental health, as well as smooth communication. We need to work together to promote digitalization in the shipping industry under a framework of a memorandum of understanding relating to promoting acceptance to use of electronic certificates between China and Singapore. MPA and China MCA has completed the trial data exchange of e-certificates on 25th October, aiming to docking of maritime single window between each other by the end of this year. It is impacted to the first transnational application of the certificate of ship, and we look forward to wider application of the certificates globally, and will make active efforts in this area. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no winter that will not pass, and no spring that will not come. We have a strong international organization, IMO, with a wide range of members. We have professional governments and institutions with stronger expertise, and we have shipping industry with stronger sense of social responsibility. I firmly believe that with the joint efforts of the shipping industry, we will definitely mitigate the impact of pandemic on shipping and promote its health and sustainable development. We will also follow the principles of win-win cooperation, innovation, green and low carbon development, and work together to achieve the common goal of maritime safety and economic recovery. To build a prosperous shipping industry is our shared vision. Let's continue to work for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cao. Next, let us hear from Mr. Esmond Paulson, Chairman of the International Chamber of Shipping, as he shares his thoughts on the vital role of seafarers. Mr. Paulson, please.
2020 has been a year like no other, where challenges to health, to business, and to the environment have confronted us, but most importantly for the leaders of the shipping industry, challenges for our seafarers. The COVID-19 pandemic means that 2020 will be a year that will long be remembered. This is certainly true for shipping, which exists to facilitate trade and the maintenance and improvement of global living standards. Regrettably, this is something which too many governments often take for granted, even during this time of continuing crisis, when the role of maritime transport in supporting the resilience of national economies is more important than ever. In spite of the many restrictions imposed by local authorities in response to COVID-19, shipping companies and seafarers have continued to keep trade moving, transporting the energy, food, raw materials, and manufactured products, including the vital medical equipment on which 21st century life depends. This year has also seen significant demands on our businesses, not only in dealing with the pandemic, but also having to manage the volatile economic climate. These demands are not new to our industry, and I would argue that throughout history, the shipping industry has weathered and managed many crises. We are and always have been a resilient industry. It is clear nonetheless that the impact of the pandemic is going to have ongoing challenges for our industry for years to come. Whilst clearly we have seen a degree of progress, if the crew change crisis continues indefinitely and ships are unable to operate safely in compliance with international rules, potentially a large number of ships may have to suspend their operations. This could have serious consequences for the maintenance of the global supply chain on which all national economies are so dependent. Ensuring that the world understands this is the responsibility of leaders in countries, leaders in intergovernmental bodies, and leaders in industry. Singapore can provide real leadership for the rest of the world. We see here in Singapore leadership in the form of the Singapore Shipping Tripartite Alliance Resilience Fund, or STAR for short, which the International Chamber of Shipping is very, very proud to support. Singapore is also championing a number of other initiatives that can provide leadership for the rest of the world. However, it is important to underline that at the heart of all this must be our seafarers, the heroes at sea who are still too often being ignored. Some seafarers have now been on board vessels for 17 months or more with no break or time ashore, far in excess of the 11-month contract limit set out in the Maritime Labour Convention. Onshore staff also face local restrictions and changes to their working lives during the pandemic. All of these stresses and strains will surely have an impact on crew and shore staff's physical and mental well-being. The maritime industry should expect these issues to go on for long after the COVID-19 pandemic. We must actively recognize the human cost of ignoring our seafarers and their cry for help. As some of you may know, in addition to my role as chairman of the International Chamber of Shipping, I'm also a vice president of the Mission to Seafarers. This is a role that I'm passionate about and one that has really shown me firsthand the human consequences of the crew change crisis. As a Mission to Seafarers Secretary General Canon Andrew Wright said earlier this month, quote, "The intense isolation felt by seafarers during this pandemic is something which many have raised with our chaplains around the world. The challenge now is for the international community and industry to take steps to avoid a serious mental health crisis and potential safety incidents. It is not stating the mark to suggest that lives depend on it." If I may, I would like to take this opportunity to issue a plea to all those leaders attending this event and invite you to support the Mission to Seafarers and other organizations supporting our seafarers day in and day out. Especially at this time of year, as we approach the Christmas period, the impact of being away from family will be most acutely felt. We need companies and governments to step up and support our seafarers. At the International Chamber of Shipping, we have been working with a coalition of organizations that support to seafarers at this time. We are encouraging ship owners, managers, and charterers, indeed all who can support seafarers, to step up. From the technology companies who provide free phone calls and data, to those who can provide gifts of kindness to the seafarers and importantly, their families, even the children who may not see their father or mother at Christmas because of the crew change crisis. Your support at this time will be much appreciated, so please consider what you can do to help. The global pandemic will fundamentally impact the way we work in the future, and we as leaders will need to respond to this challenge. Industry and policymakers are going to have to think differently. The old adage of "this is the way we have always done it" will have to change. We can no longer live in our own shipping sector bubble, and we are going to have to help to prepare our seafarers to manage new ways of working. This new way of working will include the way we embrace the technological and digital revolution, where it will not just be about learning how to operate a piece of equipment. This will be about thinking vertically, up and down the supply chain, rather than horizontally to other shipping sectors. Offering efficiencies for customers and better resource management will be critical. The ultimate and longer-term challenge that we all face as a global industry is the one of climate change. While the shipping industry is only responsible for about 2% of global emissions, we as a sector are acutely aware of our responsibility to mitigate the effects of climate change. We are committed to the reduction of the industry's CO2 emissions, fully in line with the International Maritime Organization's 2050 strategy. In addition to working with IMO member states, including the leadership shown by Singapore in seeking to find pragmatic solutions to carbon emissions, ICS, along with other industry partners, have submitted a radical proposal to establish a $5 billion global fund to accelerate the research and development of zero carbon technologies. The intention of this catalytic proposal is to enable the shipping industry to decarbonize completely in line with the ambitious CO2 reduction targets agreed by IMO. This innovative proposal requires the support of IMO member states to ensure that we can deliver a sustainable and equitable future for our industry. As a global industry, we rely upon the leadership of the IMO to ensure equity for all. However, progress at IMO could be seriously undermined if the European Union presses ahead with a unilateral proposal to extend its emissions trading scheme to international shipping, including non-EU ships. with the intention of raising billions of euros to support the EU's post-COVID-19 recovery. The EU's trading partners, such as Singapore and other countries here in Asia, will no doubt view this most unwelcome initiative as an extraterritorial tax on trade. Ladies and gentlemen, whatever happens at the political level, we will need to support our seafarers. Our seafarers will be the ones who will use the new technologies required for zero carbon shipping. They will be the ones using the new digital technologies, and they will be the ones who will ensure that shipping remains a safe and environmentally sustainable industry. We at the International Chamber of Shipping are proud that IMO member states have supported our proposal to fundamentally review the STCW so that it will be fit for purpose as we look to address these exact challenges. Our seafarers are at the heart of our industry. They always have been, and they always will be. I ask you to remember them now as we deal with the crew changes crisis, and I ask you to remember them in the future as we look to build the sustainable future that we all want. We ignore the vital role of seafarers at our peril. Let us not make that mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poulsen. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move into the panel discussion now, please note that you can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to pose questions to our panelists. And with that, I will hand the time over to our panel moderator. Mr. Ismail, please.
Thank you, Laura, and a good day to everyone. We've got participants from 60 countries and of course everyone from Singapore and the whole maritime community. You've heard the opening speeches, the keynote address, and the opening nuances from the speakers that have just spoken. They've given you a whole range of issues to think about, and as Laura had said, do ask your questions. But we start by welcoming you to this seminar, which is such an important seminar about safety. And we actually asked you questions before at the point of registration. So let's just see what is that response from the pre-event survey response, right? And then we'll show it up on the screen. So this is from you. This is your feedback, both from question 1, which you see on the left, which is what are your top 3 concerns about maritime safety, given the challenges, and right up there, it's crew wellness, crew welfare, and then after that, still on the human factor, the safety of the crew, fatigue and crew changes. We will certainly want to take this up in this question. May not be today, but tomorrow. Tomorrow we continue the second day of this conference, and as a start for plenary 1, it is about mental health and wellness. It's about helping seafarers cope during the pandemic. So we hold that question for a while and see how it then comes up again from any one of you in any specific ways. But let's address question 2, which is what more can we do as a maritime industry? And in this question, I think I want to open up to the panel members and ask a specific question, perhaps in a suspension. You've heard Dr. Chow talk about strengthening joint efforts. So perhaps to the 3 panelists, to Dr. Degim, to Mr. Young, and to Mr. Poulsen, in your own specific areas, looking at this feedback from the participants, the top line there is collaboration. So I would ask any one of you, or maybe Dr. Degim first, what more can the maritime industry do in terms of collaboration and strengthening efforts? And perhaps for Dr. Degim, it's in the area of global institutions or in the global effort. And perhaps to Dr. Young, again, an expansion of maritime authorities, and to Mr. Poulsen, related to shipping companies. Over to the panel. Dr. Degim, please.
Thank you, Ishak. Yes, it can certainly be said that collaboration of all involved in shipping is of utmost importance, especially in view of the ongoing pandemic. And we have managed to increase our collaboration very, very much over the last few months, basically since March of this year. We have seen an unprecedented cooperation between the global standard setters, like not only IMO, but also other UN entities involved in shipping, like ILO, the World Customs Organization, UNCTAD, many other UN entities have worked very closely together with the shipping industry. I would in particular mention ICS here under Mr. Paulson, but also ITF, the International Transport Workers Federation, has taken very, very active part in the ongoing work to address the issues that have arisen. The hope is, of course, that we will be able to continue this collaboration once the crisis has been overcome, because I'm sure it has given all sides involved insights into the problems of the other entities that we didn't have before in this very, very detailed measure. So, yeah, in this regard, the pandemic was actually an accelerator of international cooperation in shipping in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dagim. What about Mr. Young, an expansion perhaps from what Dr. Chow has said in terms of collaboration and strengthening joint efforts at the maritime authorities' perspective?
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm from China Maritime Safety Administration. To my view, from regulatory perspective, to ensure maritime safety, we cannot rely on just one country, one organization, or one company. So firstly, governments around the world should strengthen cooperation and communication and form harmonized standards. To this perspective, during the pandemic, we closely cooperate with Singapore MPA, Hong Kong Wind Department, Danish Maritime Authority. We also host some online seminars or discussions. Secondly, governments should strengthen cooperation with shipping companies. Governments supervise and provide services to companies as well to promote shipping development, implement international conventions, and ensure maritime safety are the joint responsibility of both companies and the governments. To this end, governments should listen to the appeals from all the companies and all the aspects related. After the outbreak of the pandemic, China Maritime Safety Administration kept close communication with shipping companies. We provided assistance and facilitation in ship berthing, crew change, supplement supply, and certificate renewal. Just like Dr. Song mentioned, we now already smoothly conducting seafarers change to the normal level. Before the pandemic, I believe that around 500 per day. Now we already reach such level. We also developed a guidance on the prevention and control of COVID-19 on board. This already mentioned by Dr. Song. We provided to the IMO, and also IMO provided to the companies, providing guidance to shipping companies, ships, and seafarers. Meanwhile, shipping companies implement policies and measures to ensure maritime safety. To adding something, I would like to say that between the government agencies' cooperation also is very important. So from Maritime Safety Administration, we fully understand the importance of the seafarers to the ship safety and pollution prevention. But it not necessarily to everybody else to understand as maritime safety people. So we fully contact with the quarantine agencies, border control agencies, and the local government. I think between the dialogue between the local government and the shipping companies, as well as the maritime safety authorities, is very, very important. So at the very beginning of the outbreak of the pandemic, that we also met a lot of resistance for seafarers changing. So after we push and done a lot with dialogue, discussion with local government and the other agencies. So I mentioned that today we almost reached the normal level of a seafarers change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Paulson, your comments perhaps from the perspective of the shipping industry.
Yes, I think I first of all very much agree with Dr. Degian that this crisis has certainly increased the level of cooperation across the board very, very significantly. It would seem a pity that it took a crisis to really accelerate this, but on the other hand, the situation being what it is, we should make the most of it, as I believe we are doing. I think in the case of industry, we quite early on in ICS set up initially twice weekly and now once a week task force specifically to deal with the crew change crisis issue. And we, together with no less than 15 other associations, developed in a matter of weeks a set of 12 protocols governing how to carry out crew change. The document has since been updated, I think, at least 3, if not 4 times. And to me, the speed with which this was done and the fact that it was basically embraced by IMO and forwarded to all IMO member states is probably the best example that I've seen in my many years in this industry of how to deal with an important and urgent issue with a minimum of fuss and a minimum bureaucracy, and where people really just said, we have to deal with this and let's be practical. We could say that our results have not been as we would have hoped, because what is very obvious is that the issue of crew change in many jurisdictions is a question for the local Ministry of Health rather than the local Ministry of Immigration or Transport. And so in this regard, we have perhaps still some way to go. But I would say, based on the figures we heard earlier, the fact that Singapore has gone from 10 or 20 crew changes a day to more than 500 or 80% of its peak is a great thing, and is actually another example of where I think we as industry, particularly the Singapore Shipping Association, has worked tirelessly with MPA to come up with standards that are now, I'm pleased to see, also being adopted in other jurisdictions. Some may say that these requirements are extremely stringent, but at the same time, when you have the growth in volume, if I can put it that way, that we've seen, then I think something is being done the right way. So all in all, I think it was also mentioned our cooperation with, for example, the ITF, which historically I wouldn't say has been a a close one. I mean, we've always had a courteous relationship with them, but we have worked together in preparing joint letters to the United Nations Secretary General, to the G20, to the G7, jointly highlighting this issue. And again, I think is another very good example of not only with industry, but across industry association cooperation.
Thank you, panel speakers. Now we have a question from the participant. We'll flash the question on the board and I'll just quickly read it. It's related in a way to crew change. And it's in a questions related to work rest hours. And it goes like this: would the COVID new norm related initiatives further impede the proper implementation of MLC 2006 work rest hours requirement for seafarers? And you can see that question in one of the chat. And it goes on to end by the specific question asked is, what could the maritime leaders do to correct the situation immediately? And I think this question is a little bit more related to Dr. Degim and perhaps Mr. Young as an authority.
Yes, we have, of course, as I already said, worked together with other UN entities. And in this case, it is the Maritime Labour Organization, the International Labour Organization, and especially its maritime branch, the ILO. Now, the problem here is that the 11 months limit that is generally assumed to be the limit set by the Maritime Labour Convention is a question of interpretation, and different parties to the convention interpret this in a different way. So it would probably already help if ILO could clarify and come to a unified interpretation of the work and rest hour regulations. Outside the remit of IMO, IMO has guidelines on fatigue for seafarers. They are not mandatory, they are recommendations. But we cannot regulate this aspect of maritime labor. This comes under ILO. And in this regard, I would also like to say that we have recently been informed at IMO that charterers increasingly include in charter contracts provisions for no crew change to be affected, the so-called no crew change clause, basically inciting people to violate international law. And we are very concerned about this development. Again, something that cannot necessarily easily be addressed by IMO, since this is the commercial side of shipping. But even to bring these matters up in the open will already help in these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's kind of clarified the question, and I will not put it up to Mr. Young or Mr. Paulson for that specific question, unless you guys want to chime in. We do have, by the way, your Q&A under the chat. Please come in and let us know what questions you have. We do have a second question, and if you can see the details of the question in the Q&A tab. And the question is about the FAL Convention, the FAL Convention, the Facilitation of Maritime Traffic. And the question goes like this. FAL Convention, though the convention comes with great intent to reduce the workload, the practical reality is quite different. And it continues to say that each country has come with their own format of Excel-based forms where the information required is not aligned, as in different formats. It has made it challenging for the owners and managers to keep up with these requirements. Is there any work plan to align the forms and information required to be submitted? Perhaps, Mr. Paulson, are there work in the light of your area in the shipping companies?
I am not specifically aware of this. I think I hate to do this, but perhaps Dr. Deggan is better qualified to answer this one.
Dr. Deggan, back to you again.
Yes, that is a question that has come up very often, especially in view of the pandemic, and especially also in electronic data exchange becoming mandatory in 2019. Now, the single window drive is is taking off now, and many countries are very interested because the benefits are very, very obvious. This specific question on the data format has been identified as a priority issue by IMO and especially by the Facilitation Committee. We have developed, or has been in existence for a long time, something called the IMO Compendium on Facilitation and Electronic Business. And one of the main work items that are being dealt with at the moment is data harmonization globally, just for the purpose, exactly as the question asked, to make sure that countries sets so that they are easily interchangeable and interoperability between different countries is guaranteed. We have a expert group on data harmonization working constantly on this. They are meeting twice a year. They are highly qualified experts with the only aim of making sure that international exchange of data will be made easily and possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dagan. So what we'll do very quickly now is we'll run a poll to seek feedback from the participants that are joining us today. And it's a very quick poll through Zoom. Let us set it up. I'll wait for the poll to be ready, and once you guys can see it, it is a question related to which areas would a paradigm shift be most urgently needed to improve maritime safety? And we've got a couple of questions or answers there for you to kind of indicate which of these areas. Is the poll up? Let me take a look for a while. Yep, okay, you should have the poll now. The poll is running. We'll wait for a while, and of course we will look for the other questions. So for those who are looking up for the poll, it's right, it should be up there on your screen. So the question again, in your opinion, in which of these areas would a paradigm shift be most urgently needed to improve maritime safety? And the 5 answers are policy making, crew training and welfare, adoption of technology, maritime incident risk management, and intergovernment. Once we're ready, we'll show the answers to the poll. We just wait for just a few more seconds, and we have the poll that's going to be displayed in terms of the answers. So whilst we wait for the poll, just a reminder for those who are joining us tomorrow. Yep, here we go with the poll, and I'll talk about tomorrow shortly. So again, well, certainly we'll see crew training and welfare becomes the right up there in the paradigm shift that's required. And I would like to take that question in a bit more specific points through the panel. And my specific question to the panel related to crew training and welfare will be this. You know, at some point, hopefully sooner than later, we will overcome the crew change crisis. And when that day comes, to the panel, what do you see as the most urgent area to improve for crew training and crew welfare? Up to any member of the panel. What do you see as the most urgent area to improve crew training and welfare? Since Dr. Dagan has been speaking quite a bit, Mr. Young, would you have a response to the specific question on crew training and crew welfare? And this is, when we say sooner or later, this will be all over. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. It's hard to say which one is the most priority. To my view, I think to protect seafarers' welfare is a long and systematic work that requires collaborations from all stakeholders in the shipping industry. We think we already stressed the importance of the seafarers, not only to maritime safety, but also to the safety of the industry, as well as the economic safety. So the seafarers, I think, is the most important we should look after. First, efforts should be made to raise the attention of the whole society to the profession of seafarers. IMO has established Seafarers Day, which enables the public to get to know and understand seafarers. However, we should realize that there is still a long way to go in promoting the value of the seafarers, popularizing navigation knowledge, and introducing the profession of seafarers. Secondly, the pandemic has made us realize that there is growing disparities between the working environment at sea and on land. So I hope that all stakeholders in the shipping industry can provide tangible help to improve the working environment for seafarers. For example, provide seafarers with Wi-Fi and other communication services on ships and at ports. In addition, we could consider providing seafarers with mental health self-testing method and intervention system on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Paulson, your thoughts on the same question?
Yes, I think as has been alluded to by Dr. Deggan, there is in effect a shortage of seafarers, particularly of the more qualified seafarers, and as this develops, and unless this is addressed, then obviously the training issue and the welfare issue is going to become more and more critical. What I've seen myself on visits to our member associations is a tremendous amount of investment in training facilities, be it in India or in the Philippines, of really a very, very high caliber. And I think that also, quite frankly, it becomes a competitive issue. Are you looking after your seafarers well? Because if you are, they're very likely to rejoin you when they come to the end of their contract. So I think, in a way, that's almost self-evident. But I think in all, I fully agree that these two are the most important. And I also think that we must be very, very careful going forward to try to standardize, so far as it's possible, the teaching and the systems that these seafarers are going to have to work with. I think standardization is going to become quite an issue because without it, then there will be training for one particular piece of equipment that doesn't work for another. So I would think that's a big part of it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Dr. Gagam, you want to add on anything or in that light?
I fully agree with what the other speakers just said. These are all very, very valid arguments. I just wanted to come back to something that was mentioned previously, and that's the ongoing revision of the STCW Convention. That is the International Convention regulating the trainings for standards and watchkeeping. And the revision is urgently needed. It's a quite old convention, and some of its provisions need definitely to be looked at. And I'm sure that we will come in the next few years to a it will be a lot of work, the revision needed, but we will probably arrive at a much improved convention, and especially the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic will have a big influence on how the future convention will look. Thank you.
Can I add on that?
Yes, please, Mr.
Yes, ICS last year pressed IMO, you could say, or encouraged IMO to agree to a revision of this STCW as a very important issue. And actually, had it not been for the COVID-19, probably that work would have begun this year. As it is, it will hopefully be begun in 2021. And we very much agree it is really critical, and it is part and parcel of what we're discussing here. The training and the terms and of the new STCW really will be very, very important for the industry.
And it is also echoed in a question from the participants, and that being, what would be the best solution for the STCW revalidation courses for seafarers during the pandemic? Would there be a best solution of sorts? From any one of the panel members?
We are currently considering in IMO also e-learning and online courses. That has, of course, is another issue that has taken on a special importance with following the pandemic. This has been discussed for a while, but no real solution has been arrived at. The subcommittee in IMO that is dealing with these matters is the HTW subcommittee, Human Element Training and Watchkeeping. And they will have their next session in February, and they will have a special section set aside during the discussions to deal with the fallout from the pandemic. And these kind of questions will definitely be discussed there, and so with the objective to arrive at internationally accepted solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Young, would you like to add on anything in that light of STCW courses for seafarers, if any?
Personally, I have no idea on the STCW at the moment. So I think the most important for the seafarers that at the moment the problem, I believe, is to make the profession of seafarers more attractive. So to my personal experience, 30 years ago, I worked on board ship. I feel very proud to be a seafarer, international trading seafarer. At the present stage in China, at least in China, less and less attractive from seafarers, this profession. So this is the government, all the I think the industry, everybody should think about why. So this problem, if you cannot solve this problem, the education, I think education can solve the problem at the moment. Let's say the quality of the seafarers and how to dealing with the pandemic. So I think the pandemic will go over sometime, but attraction, the professional attraction, how to make the seafarers profession more attractive. This is a long-standing problem the government should think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, as I stated earlier, tomorrow, Plenary 1 will address a lot more in relation to seafarers, the well-being of seafarers. And I suppose some of these topics will be picked up again tomorrow. Let me just turn back to that poll we had. If you remember the poll, the number 3 area that you guys have kind of voted for would be adoption of technology, right? And that's on the screen. Yeah. And I just want to pick up a question from the participants related to this technology question. And the question is there any plan to introduce IMO circular on setting up minimum requirements of internet facility on board vessels? And I suppose that goes to Dr. Degim.
There is a very easy answer to this, and the answer is no. There are no plans, and it has not been suggested. I would assume nowadays that ship owners, everyone, ship operators, it's normal today to have internet facilities. I know it's a bit difficult on board ships, but the availability is increasing massively and has been in the last few years. It would also be a question whether this is an IMO matter. We deal with technical requirements for ships, or whether this is more a crew welfare issue and should therefore come under the auspices of the International Labour Organization, especially the Maritime Labour Convention. But anyway, the way we work in IMO is that our member states raise issues, and then the committees and subcommittees of IMO deal with these issues. And the question of internet facilities on board ships has not yet been raised officially. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to follow up another question related to technology. And you know, as many being mentioned right up in your earlier opening speech, Dr. Degim, and also from the other speakers. And there's a lot of, we can say it's being hopeful about technology. So the question I would ask is, when it comes to adoption of new technology, that some of it was mentioned earlier, and these adoption for maritime safety, which, if any of the panel members would think about this question, which do you feel is most hopeful about that will bring about a significant improved state compared to the current situation, and state in relation to safety perhaps? And conversely, for that is for being most hopeful. Conversely, which technology do you feel most apprehensive about in terms of implications for maritime safety? Open to the panel members. Perhaps Mr. Paulson, would you like to take this question?
It's a very, very difficult question, frankly, to answer. I'm just not really sure. I'm not really sure how to address it. I think talking to young people, I get the impression that some of the younger generation are suddenly a little bit interested in a maritime career because technology is coming into our industry in very, very quickly and well, very quickly, and I think many people in the general public think that shipping is a rather old-fashioned, slow and resistant to change, and that actually technologically there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, which I suspect probably is the case. But if we were to take Mr. Young's point, which is how can we make this industry more interesting and attractive for the young, then perhaps the way to do it is to combine technology and the incentives and the opportunities that technologies provide in terms of working on board a ship, where the skill sets of the future clearly will be completely different.
Thank you. Mr. Young, would you like to add on about technology? Where do you feel is most hopeful, and what, conversely, what could be you're most apprehensive about in relation to implications for maritime safety?
Yeah, like Mr. Paulson mentioned, that I believe that living the life on board ship should be at least the same as on shore. So all the facilities, new technologies utilized on shore should be applied on board ship. So especially the young generations need to share all the means for the modern life. I believe that. So we should discuss. I mean, the government should discuss use all the new technologies on board ship, not only concern the ship safety, the hardware, software for the ships and the shipping community, but also for the lives on board the ship. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Degim, you did mention quite a few things in your opening, in your keynote address. What would your view be based on those two questions? What is most hopeful, and what would you be most apprehensive about?
Another aspect of the whole matter is, of course, the importance states give to maritime training and training of seafarers. I had the pleasure a couple of years ago to visit Dalian University in China, for instance, which I think is a shining example on how seafarers training can be conducted and can be given an enormous importance with state support. In many other countries, this is quite diversified, and seafarers training is not in the mind of the governments in a way it is in some other countries. So what we, for instance, fighting with at IMO at the moment is the question of having enough berths for the cadets to complete the practical training that is required for their certificates. It's becoming increasingly difficult for these cadets to actually serve the time they need on board ships. And regarding what are you most apprehensive about, it is not so much apprehensive, but I think sometimes the expectations exceed reality. And that's, for me, especially the case with the autonomous ships. There was the question when we started this work at IMO, whether the autonomous ships would make seafarers redundant and no future for their careers. And I think people overestimate massively what can be done there technologically, and that these changes will not be tomorrow. They will be far in the future, and there will be lots of time to adapt also maritime training in a way that it goes along with new technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we do have quite a bit of question coming from the participants with regards to crew change, crew welfare, health monitoring on board. And I would like, in the interest of time, perhaps put that aside, and if you guys were participating for tomorrow, put that in plenary one. There are wonderful questions there. And in relation to the questions that I see, I'll pick up this question. It's an interesting question, something we got to think about, and that question is, what will be the cause effect of crew change of this pandemic? What will be the cause effect of crew change of this pandemic? Anyone from the panel would like to start first?
I'm not sure I really understand that question. What will be the cause effect?
So, of course, we think of crew change, seafarers, we think about welfare, and so what happens beyond the new normal? What happens then in relation to any of the areas for crew change? What will be the cause effect after when the new normal comes in any areas of the crew change?
Well, I mean, the one thing that we've seen during this crisis is, quite frankly, very often a non-compliance with the Maritime Labour Convention due to ports countries not being willing to allow crew change and so forth. And I mean, these are breaches. We've already mentioned the question of charterers inserting these clauses to stop crew changes taking place during the duration of a charter. I mean, we are speaking to many charterers as ICS to point out that this is really not acceptable in any way at all, and that it is really completely, first of all, a breach of the Maritime Labour Convention, because you're in a way forcing an owner to be in breach, but also just at a human level, it is not right. So I would say, yeah, that would be my my input.
Any other thoughts from the other two panel members, Mr. Young or Dr. Dekin?
It has certainly raised public awareness of the problem, and we have been working hard together with the other UN organizations and the maritime industry to bring this into the open and to the public, this problem we have with crew change. And I would like to mention in this connection that we have actually managed to mobilize even the main UN in New York. And neighbor of Singapore, Indonesia, has just tabled a resolution at the General Assembly of the UN that's currently meeting. And that's a resolution on crew change issues and connected issues. It is expected to be adopted tomorrow, actually. And we hope it will have a big international effect, pushing people to address the problems and find suitable solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Young, any thoughts from you?
I'm not sure about the cost effective of the crew change. To my view, protecting life and health of the seafarers is utmost. So, considering the seafarers, I think all the shipping companies and agencies should make the efforts to facilitate the change of the seafarers. So to make the seafarers on a mentally safe condition to work on board the ship, I think this is very important. Thank you.
Right, so we're almost out of time, and I thought we'll take a last question that comes from the participant. It's a very short and simple question. When do you see normalization in the maritime industry?
This is a very simple question to answer because, first of all, I'm not quite sure what you mean by normalization, but what I will tell you is never. There never will be, because this is the nature of our business. If you look at the tanker market this year, first quarter, first half, booming. Currently, not doing well. If you look at the container market at the beginning of this year, it looked terrible. Everybody very concerned about the future, what was going to happen. Look at it now, it's booming. So there is no such thing as normalization in shipping. Markets come and go. They have done since the days of the sailing ships, and in my opinion, they, at least in my lifetime, always will do. So no such thing as normalization.
I like that question because, you know, when we talk about normalization, we don't change. But I think this is the time when we will want to change and see what's next ahead. Mr. Young, and then we'll ask Dr. Degim to kind of be the last person to answer this question. Mr. Young, please. What do you see as normalization?
To me, I think it's, I think I should say it's our hope to normalize, to be normalization of the as soon as possible of the present present situation. We hope the prosperity of the shipping industry. So that's our hope, as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, and Dr. Degim.
Yeah. If the question alludes, as Mr. Young just said, towards normalization from the pandemic, there is hope that this will happen in the next few months with the vaccines becoming increasingly available. We are working closely with WHO on the matter of electronic vaccination certificates, and especially for seafarers, so that the question of travel restrictions would no longer arise as long as people have a certificate to show that they have the right vaccine. So let's hope that we will go back to something resembling normalcy, maybe towards the middle end of next year, I would hope. Thank you.
So perhaps my definition of normalization was misunderstood, in which case, sorry about that.
No, thank you, panelists. Thank you, Dr. Degim. Thank you, Mr. Young and Mr. Paulsen, and also Dr. Cha for joining us earlier in his opening remarks. We've come to an end, and again, a reminder that tomorrow we continue 3 plenaries. And for today, I think that word that we kind of just ended with, hope, because Dr. Degim also said that shipping has a sustainable future, and certainly that's not, it's just beyond hope. It is sustainable, and we know that safety makes it sustainable. So thank you very much for the panelists and to all the participants, and we hope to catch you for tomorrow in the plenary sessions.
Thank you very much, Ishak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ismail, Dr. Degim, Mr. Young, and Mr. Paulsen for your insights and a thought-provoking discussion. And that concludes the opening session of the International Safety at Sea webinar series. Join us tomorrow as our keynote speakers and panelists focus on mental health and wellness for Plenary 1 at 10 a.m. Singapore time, ship safety and incidents for Plenary 2 at 2 p.m., and ship management for Plenary 3 at 4:30 p.m. The winners for the MPA International Safety at Sea Awards will also be announced during Plenary 3, so please join us and support our winners. We would also like to get your views on today's session. We hope that you can take a few minutes to complete a feedback form that will pop up later when you exit this webinar. And last but not least, you can take part in our quiz at the end of each session to win Amazon gift vouchers worth Singapore dollars 50. To qualify, just scan the QR code or click on the link posted in the chat window. Answer all the questions correctly, and you could be one of 3 lucky winners randomly drawn per session. Winners will be notified by email, and if you are not based in Singapore, you will receive an equivalent USD value for the Amazon gift voucher. Good luck! And on that note, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to see you at our 3 plenary sessions tomorrow. Goodbye.